Hello. Hello, good evening, everybody. Good evening to all those that are joining us here in the Auxerre and all those that probably are watching live or will be watching via YouTube in the future. I'm happy to be celebrating the first BK Talks in this format of the year. A couple of weeks ago, we had a wonderful screening of a movie, but it wasn't really a panel like this one we are celebrating today. So in a way, this is the first or the comeback to the spring semester. Today we will be celebrating the opening of an installation in the first floor of the building. It's an installation that talks about a certain period of education of Bouwkunde at TU Delft. I was just there and it was really nice to see all of you, many of you, commenting, and trying to identify with certain pieces of text or images there. For me, that was really nice. I also found the images to whom I actually related from my period here as a student in Delft a few decades ago. This Biki Talks today is part of a larger program that we have prepared for the semester. So this semester, I won't be reading everything that we're doing. Hold on. Let me see. Let me go back. I don't know how. Yeah. But anyway, after these Biki Talks today, we will be opening an exhibition in the collection rooms, which is down below the tribune, about the work of Mark Raugroot, an artist established in Amsterdam, who I consider also, in a way, an urbanist, hence the interest of bringing him here. We will be talking about visions for the future of the Netherlands in the coming month. We are now working with a series of illustrators that are producing visions for what the Netherlands could look like eventually in 2050 if the work of the research of the NL Visions team is put into place, etc., etc. I don't want to bore you with the entire program. It's online. Please watch it and please join us whenever you are interested in it. So if I go to the bottom of the matter, what is it that we are going to do here today? We're going to celebrate. That's why we call it celebrating the timeline. The order of the day. Sorry, I'm messing up a little bit with the clicker. The order of the day today is to try to understand what the installation is about, how it was made, what the process was, told by Art Oxenar and Jesse Ferlos. Excuse my pronunciation. The big disclaimer, I always pronounce things very badly, and I'm very sorry not to remember. After that, we will have a conversation that will be moderated by Willemijn. You all know Willemijn Vloed. She has been actively organizing this conversation. I'm very happy to see many of the emails that have been exchanged in the last weeks in order to try to talk about that. How do we address the past, the present, hopefully the future of education, and what is the role of collections? How do we show objects and materials that are in the collections of the university mostly? This was one of the intentions or one of the reasons why we opened the collections room under the tribune here. Right now, and in a way connected to the timeline that is being shown on the first floor, we have the exhibition here about freehand drawing. Freehand drawing that tells us about the legacy and the importance of learning to draw by hand throughout the history of Bouwkunde. Not only Bouwkunde, I think many other I learned to draw by hand in other universities. It's an essential part of our education, and I think this is really nice what this project or this collection, this exhibition reflects. Jesse even sent me a couple of weeks ago a photograph of a hand-drawn or drawing by hand by Vinnie Mas, a person with whom I've been working for many years. And it was very nice to see Vinnie in another complete different way. Without further ado, I'm going to give the word to Jesse and Art so that you let us know what the chronology upstairs is about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Javier. Just as a very short introduction, welcome everybody, thank you for coming. A short introduction to the making of, which is the presentation we'll be making as a start for a more open debate. When Dick first asked me to make a presentation of the history of Bouwkunde, immediately a timeline came to mind. There's a famous example, of course, Charles Jenks. Can we click towards Charles Jenks? Next one. Yeah. But there's also a bit of a tradition here in BK of making timelines. Maybe the first timelines I saw were made here by people that happen to sit next to each other, for instance, Max Resalada or Dirk van der Heuvel. It's quite a tradition also used as a basis for education, for helping to organize and order things. A timeline, I think, offers the perfect frame for an open presentation showing objects, because that, in the end, was the beginning of this project. Objects that tell about aspects of our history without pretending to be a complete overview of our history of the last 180 years. So this exhibition is a beginning, not an end. We brought together a selection of preferably objects. We tried to find as many as we could, telling about specific moments in and aspects of the history of our faculty of Bouwkunde. We chose not to translate Bouwkunde. We think that's a term that even also our foreign students should know and use. We did not strive to be complete, but we did try to touch upon all the major aspects of our history. So please do see it as this beginning I just mentioned and add your thoughts, your ideas, your knowledge. We began by selecting a series of themes and collected information on each theme through literature research. Quite a few books we went through. We went into archives. There is some archive here. There are some archives in the library. There's quite a bit of archive of BK Bouwkunde at the NAE in Rotterdam. But we were also very lucky. Wil Smeulers, who still knows him, who happened to be secretary of the afdelingsraad for quite a while, handed in a very complete archive of his entire period. And what might seem very boring dittos of endless discussions in the 60s and 70s were actually a very exciting and very interesting source. But also a very important source for us was talking to quite a few of you, talking to living witnesses. Then the next step was a mock-up in the cellar, where we found a wall, some of you may have seen it, of exactly the same length and size as the wall that we have now. And that helped very much to start organizing the materials, start organizing our finds. The structure of the story is simple. It's a matrix. The themes on the vertical axis and time on the horizontal axis. And helped by history itself, time was divided rather organically in 6 periods. I'll mention this just very, very quickly. The first period was 1842, 1864, when Bouwkunde was a minor within civil engineering. Then 64, 1905, when we rose to a major, but still as a part of civil engineering, but we did have our first Professor Google. Then 1905, at last, we became an independent faculty, important moment. And then, of course, came the dramatic years, 1940, 1945, ending in the closure of all education, but at some point, or in some way also, heralding a new beginning after that war. So that would be the period 1945, 1969. We named it modernization, and you could take that quite literal, because it was the first time that modernist professors came in to teach next to the still very dominant Delft school of Grand Prix Molière. And then the last period would be 1969-2000. We had some thinking to do there. All the other dates kind of go together with institutional changes. We could have taken the early 80s when we became a university, but we thought 69 was such a major moment, de elite, who does not remember that, where the structure and the way this faculty was organized changed very basically, in the sense that students and teachers and professors together got much more of a say in how we were organizing our education. So I think that was a major moment. The chronology ends in 2000 with the coming of the Bachelor Master. Then you could say a new era started, an era with, among other changes, the fact that each department was now developing its own master program and beginning also to write their individual histories. There already is a history of urbanism. Landscape architecture started writing its history, so we thought 2000 is a good moment to stop. And let me admit, it's also a little bit a cop-out, because for those last 20 years, there are so many people here that know everything much better than we could ever research it. So it was a safe idea to stay away from that last period and wait for it to become maybe a bit more history. But the wall in the cellar did also function as a place to meet and discuss with a series of live witnesses. Many of you came by there, invited or by coincidence, and that often led to long and very, very instructive discussions. We learned a lot from that, and that helped to fill in gaps, correct mistakes, and comment on the choices made. But of course, the choices as they are now are mine, and the mistakes are mine too. But we do hope that the next layer will be developed soon. I think that's an important aspect. Jules Schoonman, who excuses himself, he couldn't be here today, is working on a TU Delft wide digital timeline, also including Bouwkunde. And by introducing QR codes, which with each object, we hope to make the exhibition interactive. And that is allowing visitors to add comments, thoughts, knowledge, start discussions, so that through that digital twin, and for that digital twin, room is reserved in the captions. You will show it slowly. With each caption, already there's room to add the QR code, so that information, that interactivity can be added. Now, a major role while working towards the final timeline was played by the design, and in that sense by the designers. First by Rowan Varma, we're very sorry he couldn't be here today, who made the first sketch, and then by my neighbor Jesse Verdoes, who had the task to collect all the objects into one coherent exhibition. So thanks to him, the originally 6 themes were reduced, or should I say, forcefully regrouped into 3. He made very clear that the design with 6 lines simply would not work. So now we have 3 themes: impact, institution, students, as you may have seen. Sorry. But of course, we were quite inventive. Each theme has 3 sub-themes, so in the end we still have 9. But it saved the timeline as a design. And this organizing all the material into a legible, comprehensible timeline and a powerful design. Thank you, Jesse. Okay. And together with Dick, Jesse killed the timeline and came up with a new title. I still don't know what you had against it, but both Dick and you were very firm that it shouldn't be called a timeline. It had to be Bouwkunde in Delft, a chronology. So it is a chronology, where of course the word a is extremely important. This is not the final word. Once again, it is a beginning. So I'll now give the floor to Jesse to present you the design and talk about the making of Bouwkunde in Delft, a chronology. Yes.
Yeah, this one is not working.
That one is not working. Okay. So you take that.
So bear with me with the screen a little bit, because sometimes it goes back automatically. But I'll tell you a little bit about the kind of process in which I was involved, and together with Art and Rowan, who can unfortunately not be here today, we kind of took all this research that we just saw on the wall downstairs, and kept selecting and kept selecting it towards smaller and smaller selection, so that we could actually make an exhibition out of it that is legible. So I thought it was, I was trained here as an architect, and I thought I was quite conscious about the fact that I was really approaching this as I was taught here. So I really approached this as an architectural project. So the first thing I did was I went to the site, right? And I measured it. So this is the wall. Just to see, yeah, how much space we had and how I could kind of translate this this concept that Rohan sketched out to the bigger wall. And then we can see some of a series of models here, some of which are also on display on the table, which we use to start composing it as a whole. And this really helped because this is on a 1 to 10 scale, and we printed out all these objects that we have found on mostly on the 1-to-1 scale. And from that we started composing. So also here in the design steps we took the objects and the images really as the way to, as the way in to start thinking about the design. And then here you can see what Art talked about, that we started to indeed subdivide our topics. Like first we had 8 and then we had 3. We started to use color to make this kind of richness still have a certain legibility. And then we went to the 1 to 5 scale to kind of figure out the details, because I mean it's a timeline on the wall, so it is flat, but it's actually of course not flat at all, because we have a series of original objects in there. And the reproductions have a shadow from the wall, so it is actually still a 3-dimensional design, and that's kind of what we tested here. And then indeed in the end we even tested like a very quick mock-up of like how much these vitrines would actually protrude into the room, etc. And then of course we had a lot of tests. I was kind of half jokingly talking with Art today about how archival objects can sometimes look boring. And I mean, this was a kind of also a personal challenge for me to, you know, get to not have this exhibition have that feeling. And I think in the end also the colors, and we really thought about the typeface and the colors to make this an attractive whole, and to make it something that you would like to look at and something that you can keep passing by whilst walking through this hallway multiple times. And yeah, this was also, like, this is of course not an exhibition how you would have it in a museum, where you usually go only once and you have like kind of limited time to look at it. But this is an exhibition which you walk past multiple times, maybe even 100 times if you go to the library a lot. So this was also a reason for us to really make it have that density of information, so that you could continue to find new things and new stories in there. And then we went into the production, which we had again, luckily had a lot of time to test the colors again. Of course, if you can have a color code, but then you order the paint and it looks a bit different, and you need to paint. You need to order 3 other small, like very tiny different kind of paints with a different satin or matte like kind of look. So you know, we did all that testing, and same goes for the captions, which is like in a way a small detail, but there was a lot of attention put into those. And then of course there's this whole thing about the actual objects that we used. So we were lucky that we had a lot of private collections that we could fortunately use to put in that room, because of course if you use like officially archival objects, usually you need to put it into these rooms that are climatized and where the light can be regulated, etc. But we could luckily borrow some objects like these that were actually resistant to these kind of processes, so we could actually still put it on the wall. But then, you know, you cannot just take these things into the model hall and kind of see if they fit on your stand that you're making. So, you know, this is a whole lot of measuring and figuring out, as you can kind of see in the sketches, and then hoping that it would hold the weight. And here you can kind of see a fun series of photos of Bas, who helped us a lot during the process, taking Grand Prix Moliere's head out of the library, and together we made a very custom, as for all the objects actually, a customized, unique size to the object display stand and vitrine in the end. And yeah, as you can see here, also same goes for the books, that all of course have different sizes, but also have different angles. In the end, we gave them different angles, so depending on the height of where they are displayed, they always face the viewer. So this was the fun part where we were actually installing, Art and me together, all these objects where we had prepared everything finally. Let's see. I wanted to say something. Just looking if I don't forget anything. So what I wanted to say with this one, kind of press that. Luckily, we actually had the time to really construct this thing. Like normally, maybe also with an exhibition, you maybe have 1 or 2 days where you really have to like push it out. And now it was really nice that we actually had some weeks, to be honest, to slowly build it up. But this also allowed us to test in the design itself. So, I mean, you see some of the test of the captions we did. This was actually when everything else was kind of finished, and we could really look. We could kind of use the actual design as a model to test the last kind of design decisions we made. But I think, that's really a thing that I also learned from it, that this kind of slow process also allows for these things to happen and to kind of gradually and organically still take these decisions while we're actually making the thing. Yeah, so, and this is then, as most of you already seen, of course, in the hallway, the end result. I would like to say for that, that as art shows, we started from this reference of Charles Jenks, which was a timeline based on images. And this chronology is made after and shaped by the images and objects that were found during the research and were available for display. And as Art already noted before, this is showing a chronology, so it's not the chronology. And this is because it forms a starting point for further additions and reactions that can hopefully happen later during for example, through the digital version. And then as a fun note, this was sent by my roommate yesterday, of already students from the housing program using the timeline to kind of start their research. So this was, of course, quite exciting. We hope that this will continue to be like that. So yeah, that was I give the word to Willemijn.
Well, thank you, Art and Jesse, for this very clear introduction. Well, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude that you all came. And I think tonight we are really a nice representative group of people that have a lot of memory. And I think we have very old and very young people here. I would like to welcome you to, the oldest is Jan Mollema, who sits there. He is from 1935. And then we have Max Risselada. He is, you were from 1939. Yes. So we have very long memory here. But we also have very young students, a very engaged new generation of young students. They immediately feel happy about that. But my idea was to have a kind of very open conversation on the timeline. But I try to structure it a bit, and I think we have about an hour. So we have to make sure that we take for each topic about, well, I have three topics that I would like to address, and I think we should take, well, more or less 15 minutes, 20 minutes, but maybe there's someone who can keep a bit an eye on that. Yes, and well, I was thinking it would be a fruitful discussion. Well, my idea was maybe we can help. I don't know who is going to, because this is a chronology. Well, who is going to work on the next phase of the chronology? Because Aart, he is from 1958. So he will graduate in a. He will retire in a in a couple of years. But yes, he is from 1997, so he will stay. But I think, well, amongst you there will be many people that have thoughts to share, that have ideas on what to put on display, how to put it on display. And I think this discussion can be a start about that. I have made 3 blocks. The first one will be about, well, the design of the timeline as a physical object. The second one, I hope that will be a bit more, well, I think every block should be lively, but the second part is about the contents. Well, I really hope that I can trigger the audience to tell us what is really good, but also what are you missing, or what do you think that they did they do something completely wrong? I heard that they tried to do everything to bury themselves into all these disclaimers. And I think the third block should be about, well, what could be the meaning of this timeline for our faculty, for our education? And yeah, I have prepared some questions, and I have prepared some people to address them. But I really think this is open, and if you have a question, raise your hand, and I really want this to be lively and active and open. Yeah. Well, because you are so young and you are so old, I thought I thought I should invite someone exactly in the middle of you to express his thoughts on, well, what do you think about if you walk through this corridor and you experience this timeline from the perspective of design? And that's Joran. Joran, maybe you can come here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello. Would you like me to sit down?
Yeah, if what you want.
Okay.
I will sit next to you. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I have some thoughts, of course. Thank you, Willemijn, for having me here, and thanks, Jesse and Aart, for this beautiful outcome of quite some intensive work, I imagine. And I will keep it indeed more on the design line of way, and I cannot see myself leaning towards this. Jean Prouvé actually had a big hand in the 2D design of the whole timeline. As we can see the model over here, it's a beautiful depiction on some of the beautiful radii used for the corners. But I'd like to focus a little bit more on a subset of this, let's say, graphical representation, and that's because of my big personal hobby, and that is typography. And a subset of typography itself is, of course, a typeface. And I saw the beautiful picture on that table that you were really getting into the typeface and getting the right design. What is really interesting on that is that, first of all, my remark or what I saw on the typeface is the typeface has some ink traps. And I don't know if everybody knows what an ink trap is, and typographers are of details, but an ink trap would be something like in the K here, where there's a little hole for when ink is being printed with a fluid, it will close off a bit and then ideally get into a strong corner or angle shape. While actually there's being stickers used, which is an interesting approach. But more without that, because that's a silly detail, of course. The message I'd like to show here, that's a very contemporary show or depiction of a choose of a typeface. It's very much in vogue to use ink-trapped typefaces. Also online, in print, in a non-ink purposes, which is very interesting. Set that aside, the first thing we do at an exhibition, we are going to read, and we are first going to read the edited, the directed texts, which is very nice, I think. So we start from the very left, and then we are going to read the captions, and that's perfectly well designed. I've never seen so many right things with N dashes, M dashes, the right quotation marks. It's beautifully done. And never that consistent before, and I think we really should do something about that in the faculty in general. But I really would like to juxtapose that idea of this very contemporary typeface against all the beautiful lettering, all the beautiful handwritten lettering that transfers slowly into printed lettering, carved lettering for all these posters. And then in the end, even when the medium changes into a more of a critique or columnesque way of providing voices with magazine covers, going from the sans serifs to the modern or modernistic serifs. I would like to challenge everybody to look and keep that in balance, because there is besides of course all the content and the architectural travels we also make a beautiful travel through typographics and type design. And I think that's the first thing that I would see. It's beautiful to see here the Elite or Oase, who was a great mark also in the Dutch history of type design. It's beautiful to see, and I hope everybody is going to see that. I don't really have a question. It's just a remark.
No, it's
but maybe
all fine.
there's somebody can reflect on that or think about that.
Well, what's of course wonderful is that already you find layers in this exhibition that we did not deliberately put in, but apparently the material brings along. So, well, thank you for picking that up.
Well, thank you, Joram. Yeah.
You're
Well, you really went into the typography, but what I think is another very striking characteristic of the chronology is this, 2.5D, that you introduce the spatial objects in it, and well, all these objects, well, they come from, they can come from different periods, but I think now there is a trend to digitalize everything. All the storages from musea, from archives, everybody tries to bring their treasures to the foreground, and because of this digitalization, there is a new way and new opportunities to put that, to make that part, to make it part of this project. And well, I would like to invite Charlotte van Wijk, who is working at the Chair of History, and she is managing the chair collection and working on, she is studying objects that she, taking from the archive that might be valuable for future development. So the floor is for you.
All right, thank you. So first of all, I guess I would like to congratulate my neighbors, Aart and Jesse, because they're both my desk neighbors upstairs and my collection neighbors right now. So welcome in the neighborhood. I really enjoyed seeing you work together. Highlight, I think, was the testing of the colors, for me anyway. Endless discussions, very fun to see. So congratulations. So I started working with the chair collection. My first contact with collections, actually. And I soon found out that the closer you look, the more fun it gets, actually. So I've been trying to spread the word with the chairs by adding more information and adding the information to the chairs themselves in the collection space. And I think you've done a really good job at that as well. I'm looking forward to seeing the QR codes added. That will be even more interesting, I think. So enough of the congratulations. What I would like to see with the collection objects is that the closer you look, the more rich they become. And I found that out by starting research into collections a few years ago. And at first I became really disappointed because I found out that there used to be huge artistic collections, hundreds of plaster casts and beautiful artworks and reproduction stuff. And a lot of it's gone. Only a handful of things remain. And at first I found it quite depressing. But recently I found out that if I flip my viewpoint and I start looking at the ones that we do still have, and really look closely and research them very well, I can really actually open up a door to the past, to very specific people, circumstances, to educational developments, to, yeah, so I could give us an example, the horse's head that's in the exhibition in the Treasury. When I started really looking into that horse's head, which is still in active use at the hand drawing department actually, I found out it must be at least, or at the latest, made in 1883, because it has a stamp of Vanni, which is a workshop that closed in 1883. So that told me that that horse's head was actually ordered by the first teachers when they were making the Polytechnic School of Delft. So that's a really big step in, not just for us as a faculty, but also for education in the Netherlands, etc. So this one plaster object might not have huge monetary value, but it has, for the faculty and for the university, has a huge historical value. So that's a kind of a, yeah, if you use those objects to tell stories to people, I think you can really bring the history to life. And yeah, I really welcome that actually. So,
Well, keep on doing that.
yeah.
Well, I walked the building because, well, we have this chronology putting on display a lot of materials, but if you look down the corridors, you'll find some old collections that we used to have in the Berlageweg building, and well, mainly they were about building technology to show you how to build things and that you can feel materials and that you know how, what is their expression. And well, I invited Vido because, well, he is into this technical detail education, and he contributed to the chronology by borrowing or lending a number of books, and he asked me when am I going to get them back? But I told him that they will stay there forever.
I'm very lucky he only passed by once.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, maybe well, because these material collections, they still exist, but they look a bit abandoned. What can you learn from this chronology for the upkeeping of your, well, and what should there be more exposed?
Ooh, that's a deep question. But I think that the fact that the collection, and you're referring to a collection of natural stone, which is in the corridor, but that's because heritage and architecture is housed, you know, on the edge of the building, on the west side of the building. So no one really passes by. But in the corridor, I have a collection of stone samples that actually dates back for a larger part to the 1870s, where Professor van der Kloes, the first professor in building materials, he started as a leraar on building materials, started collecting building materials. And there's actually a very nice floor plan of the first building of architecture of the university, the Polytechnic School, in the exhibition, where there is a very small space in the middle of the floor plan that says Laboratorium voor Bouwmaterialen or something like that. And that is the place where Professor van der Kloes started to build up his collection. Not only stone, also wood, of course, from the tropics, from the colonies, etc., etc. And that's what I think is interesting. What for me is interesting on this chronology, it's quite linear. But for me, a chronology in a way is also circular, and the way I use the chronology, because I am in the heritage department, I like to go to work on things from the past, things with the past. And for example, this stone collection is still used in education, so it actually was never in the Berlage building, because it was found back in the cellar of civil engineering, where it was actually to be thrown away. But someone called me, hey, you are doing a PhD with natural stone, are you interested? And then I started studying this collection. So it's not only the chronology as such that is interesting, but I think there are points in this chronology that deserve much more attention, and well, also comes back in a circular way to, for example, education now.
Okay, nice. yeah, well, we are waiting for your contributions to it, your ideas. You can submit them to Art and maybe better to Jesse. Yeah, 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 yeah. Max.
I want to say I even had to do an exam when the building and the collection was in civil engineering. A student of architecture, you had to do an exam.
At civil engineering,
In
so it's
you
not
had to
something.
go there and to do an examination where they put these materials in front of you, and then you had to say what it was, whether it was marble or wood or things like that. You still had that too now?
I still have those spaces. I can get them and ask you whether you still know it, Max. But yeah. We do it quite differently, but it's still part of the education. And luckily, now really within the Faculty of Architecture, not only externally at civil engineering. Yeah. Yeah, there's also a website that presents those types of stone, which is also available not internally for education, but externally for people in the field, restorers that want to identify a certain type of stone. There is this quite helpful. Yep.
Yeah, well, but I think there's nothing better than feeling and touching the stone, huh? And that you were allowed to put it over there, because when we entered this building, we were only allowed to have 1 meter of books.
It's not books, so that's why it's there.
Yeah, right. But the building has not collapsed. Yeah.
Not yet.
Okay, right. Thank you, Guido. Well, I would like to move a bit to the content, and I was thinking, well, if you close your eyes and you look through it, you see really a 19th century. Well, it's not impression. Well, to me, the colors, the number of meters, the drawings are bigger. So yeah, the stress is really on a history that is, I think, well, when I was raised in this faculty, well, it started from a more modern perspective. So this chronology, it brings back to the faculty, well, a time that is, well, that at least I know more from the city. Huh? This, for instance, this Adolphe Lecomte and the Gibbs and they were drawing professors here, but they worked in the porseleinen fles, for instance. And yeah, Kugel, he built Agneta Park, which is not in the exhibition, but there is Van der Beek. Yeah, yes. You have to make choices. But I was thinking, because there is so much stress on this 19th century, do you have this timeline? Because you had to select, you have to take a position. You decide on what to show and what not, and what to stress and what not. And do you think that this period should be, because you made this, you should restudy things, or yeah, does it? Well, what do you think should be? Well, what are we rediscovering through this? And yeah, I don't know who is well, I think Art and Jesse are the first ones to ask this question, but I think the audience will have interesting ideas on that as well. Yeah? So prepare yourself, and then they can talk, and you raise your hand, and yeah, you have to, yeah.
Well, I guess we're doing, in a way, two things. We are rediscovering and discovering. So I guess, first of all, a lot of stuff is being seen that maybe has not been seen for a long time. And so if you say, indeed, I get an image of another period, it might well be that that image was quite unknown. To give just one example, student work, there was quite a while working on this that we thought we're not going to have any student work. It's very hard to find. Well, how many of you keep your student work? Maybe your graduation work, maybe one project that was kind of successful, but there is no systematic archive of our student work of the last 180 years. So we're kind of lucky to find in at NIE, well, I don't know how to call it anymore, I think it's het Nieuwe Instituut nowadays in Rotterdam, the architecture archives, some examples of student work. the early ones we have here of the 1870s, 1880s are really the only ones we found. And indeed, they do bring you into a different period, as you were saying. Where does it bring me? Well, it brings you to an architecture that, in my feeling, still is quite close indeed to the engineer's work. We're in a world of engineering with a bit of architectural design to it. And in that sense, discovering a fairly full set of student work from the 1920s and 30s showed quite a difference. And on the one hand, a difference in the way of drawing, a difference in the kind of subjects they look at, but also still a quite dominant role of teachers. You still see quite a reflection of what the teacher is teaching, what he wants you to do. And then we found a little bit of work of Wil Smeulers in his archives of the 1960s. And then maybe for the first time you begin to see a little bit of sort of a freedom. Maybe here we see Mr. Wil Smeulers at work. So I guess that already is one aspect that you see in these drawings. Like in the beginning, it's very much, well, not a machine, but it's very much a system, a way of thinking that is taught. And very, very slowly, and indeed after the Second World War more obviously, the freedom and the more individual comes in. Although there was a time, we tend to forget that now, but Grand Prix Molière at first was invited by the students to become a professor, because for them he was very open, at least in his debate. He was very open in the way he discussed with the student. And slowly but surely his discussing became teaching, became almost preaching. But in the beginning there was this opening. So this is one thing that you could get out of what do I see changing, what do I see happening in all these drawings.
Yeah, and maybe to add to that, of course, also maybe pragmatically thinking, but if I saw the research like kind of being done by art, obviously it's also always led by the available archives that are there. I mean, you already mentioned it, but if we find a bulk of student work from this kind of period that has beautiful things in it that might not have been shown before, then this is, of course, in that instant at least, way more interesting to kind of bring to light again, let's say. But I mean, we also talked about this a little bit yesterday, and it's interesting also that that maybe towards the end we have a little bit less student work, but that's maybe also because it's like just more recent. At the same time, what I would like to say is that there were also, of course, just decisions made based on the design. So, of course, we had a selection that we kept like making more and more precise based on content. But at some point also when you start composing and we took already the stance that it was really built out of these objects and images, you also start seeing that some things just work and some things just don't work. So even based on that, of course, there were also things left out, unfortunately, but to also just make the design work and make interesting links, like what suddenly is juxtaposed to each other when you put it on a wall like this. So yeah, just to say that's also like a big, still a big deciding factor basically of what is shown in the end. Yeah.
Esther. Yeah, thank you. I completely agree with you, Willemijn, that the emphasis also in the design of the timeline is very much in the middle, also emphasized by the head of Grand Prix Molière and so on and so forth. So you see that really, if you look at this model, that is a kind of center in the design. But that's actually not what my question is about. My question is more to Aart and Jesse, because you are very polite in a way, or very so to say it's a chronology. So it can also be, we can also come up with a different one. But in the end, you have studied this for quite some time. And I'm really wondering what kind of story of the history of our faculty you want to put forward. What was the most interesting that you found? What do you want to tell us with this?
Well, that's a big question. Let me begin by saying, and I'm going to stress it again, we were happy to find things. I showed the books. There are quite a few books, but they give a lot of information, but not much work. So what indeed I was maybe looking for quite a bit, and I would have hoped to find more, but not that much, is an image of what was happening in the school, what was being made. What does that tell us? And that was not really easy to find. There is not an overflow of student work. We did find, and that's one thing I did look at, the impact. We did find, of course, names of students who graduated from here and went into practice. So at first we had a lot of pictures of that, but we had to take them out. There's an interesting book you might know, made in the 1950s, work by Dutch engineers that gives a very extensive overview of the work being done. So I guess in the end what we tried to find is a middle between all those 6 lines, which then became 3 lines, telling the basic lines of the story and showing enough of what indeed is going on. How is the design changing? How is the teaching changing? But I fully agree with you. I will repeat saying it. We can make 5, 6 other exhibitions, and I would very much like to spend more time, find work, student work. What, after all, were they making? And what, after all, does that tell us of what they wanted, but also about what the teachers wanted them to learn? And indeed, in the very last section, yes, there we could have had more student work. I would have loved to have more of that. We simply didn't have it. Is your student work still there? Okay.
TJ.
We'll come to you then.
We go to the young generation.
Hi, no, just a follow-up question with Esther's question as well. I think most
I
of
think
us...
very much it should be also a debate. We should debate with
Yes.
each other rather than make it into a question round.
Exactly, but I'm just thinking, who did you have in mind designing this for? I think that's the question that we want to know.
I guess the community of BK.
Okay. But it's very diverse and we haven't heard any... I mean, if you design for community, wouldn't have been like a community talk about this before designing this?
And I think that ties into this is also what I'm going to be honest, I didn't see it in real life. And I think I don't have to be able to make the comment I'm about to make. Because we're trying to, we're saying this chronology and we're trying to retell histories. Then what kind of doesn't sit right with me is that we're still getting histories retold by 2 white men. Sorry to be the party pooper maybe, but I mean, I think that ties into what the lady has just said and what TJ just said. I think I'm lacking some diversity maybe.
No, I think I can only say that it's a valid point and that we were also aware of this during the process. And of course we've, like as Art also already said, we did talk to a lot of people. I mean, mainly Art did this, so maybe you can tell more about it. But and of course through that, in that way we try to of course make it still an inclusive project in a sense. But yeah, I can definitely imagine that it could have been done with more emphasis on that. If that would be a completely different project, but it would definitely be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a thing we did is try to touch on too many themes. In a way, that's what you're saying. You could have taken out more specific aspects and focused just on that. Maybe that also has to do with the fact that we're overwhelmed by a lot of material and had a choice, but also wanted to show material that wasn't there. I must admit though that we did look at, for instance, the role of women. It was just now a PhD came out on that, and we do have some pictures showing indeed how long it took for women, first of all, to be allowed to study here. then to graduate, and rather painful, and she's in here. Our first female professor was 1978, and she's in here, she's dancing. So indeed, that aspect is there. And then, of course, there's the aspect of, let's say, a more open student population. There is the story of Lim Wan Chi, a student who came from Indonesia, but was of Chinese descent. He came to study here. He could get a diploma, but the university, in the university, he understood quite clearly that even if he got his engineer's diploma, he would not be able to work in state service in then Dutch-ruled Indonesia. So I decided, okay, then I'll go to China, get my final diploma there, and he went back to Indonesia and started his private practice, was very successful. We show some of his work, which, interestingly enough, was very influenced by the Amsterdam School. So here's a student from Indonesia, then the Dutch East Indies, coming to Delft, which then was very much Delft School, Grand Première, but picked up Amsterdam School design, through China, brought it back to Indonesia. And after the revolution, he became one of the major architects in Indonesia. He worked with large states, commissions, did many of the ministry buildings, a big stadium. So some of these lines are there. We did try to bring them in, but I do agree with you. Yes, it's an olla podrida. There's a little bit of everything. We try to touch maybe on too many themes. That's a good thing to discuss here. I was just going to say, here, of course, is a major opportunity when the QR codes come to add, and that's actually what we're hoping for. Because also there's limited knowledge. Yes, we found a lot, but there's also a lot we didn't find.
Yeah, you want debate,
With everybody.
Yeah, since you asked for debate, I was because this remark that was just made was that was the first thing I mentioned to the dean. This is going to happen if you want a chronology or an overview of the history. History is being done in a very different way these days. It's about multifocality. It's about looking for marginalized, oppressed voices. So how will that be part of this project? And I think that's a fair question. Why is that so? Yeah, it's almost like an Indonesian rice dish. It's very colonial. You get a little bit of everything. But why isn't there the vrouwenstudies moment, for instance, which was very important? It brought Zaha Hadid to Delft when she was not that famous. Or even the colonial connections. So Sukarno was an architect. There was the other TH in Bandung. Endless travel back and forth. So yes, from everything a little bit. But why not a greater effort to have this multifocality there fully in place, which would be really revolutionizing, I think, the history as we because this last bit, there's, for instance, the vrouwenstudies moment, right? And some of our colleagues, Suzanne Komasse and so on, they were there.
But and I was also wondering, does this represent our Faculty of Architecture Delft's education and education traditions? Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know if they can answer that, but yeah, to me it's fine. They made a different choice. Maybe it's for a next. Yeah, you can say, well, or did they consider it? Well, that's what we can ask.
What I think is important that we sit here together and openly discuss how should we tell our history. And this is one first attempt. And like we explained, it's very much focused on objects. It's an exhibition on objects. So for a part, it's also determined by what objects did we find. What did we find? But I think it's a very clear question indeed. Should we make it if we rearrange it, or if we make a next version, or if we go to the digital version, and I think that's an important one, should we bring in those lines more explicitly? And
I think it's more profound. I think it's more profound. It's about how we do history and how we think of history, how we practice history, and what sort of knowledge do we activate from history, rather than saying, oh, it's all inclusive, so we can add and add and add. That will be my position, at least.
Well, food for thought.
Also, in addition, just maybe for the next time, talk first before making, instead of, oh, it's all done and then the talk. Oh, sorry. Yeah, just an addition maybe as well for our students. Maybe for the next time you make a chronology or something, first the talk and then the making, instead of now having all of this and then comes the reaction, but it's done already. Oh, sorry.
I must admit, we did try to have a talk almost a year ago already, but for various reasons that didn't work. But that's, I'm not trying to make a cop out.
Yes.
You're right.
Although I do agree, it does feel like there's a lot of milestones that are missing. I will say, as an international student, it was quite informative for me, and I do want to celebrate your efforts. And it was nice to understand how the rich history that this institution holds. So, although of course it could be improved in many ways, and I agree with everything that was raised so far, it was also nice to see this timeline.
Well, I think here the QR codes and the digital timeline, the digital twin should be very important, because there we really need these comments, there we need to add things, and there we need all the knowledge that is here to be added. And in that sense, yes, we're very happy to live in digital times, so we can make this twin.
Right. Yeah, well, okay. Stefan is waiting.
¿Puedo hablar en español? Ah, bueno, seguimos en español. No, grapje. In English, my English. I'm so happy with the one three-dimensional object that is standing in representation, which is this boy in yellow and blue. So this is just the beginning of what I want to say. First of all, Art, you said that you talked to many people. You haven't talked to me.
I did read your book.
And this is representative for what always has happened in this faculty. Because I was not in architecture. I did my technical jobs. Do you know name Albarda?
I read your book on him.
Okay. So you know I have a collection of these drawings. But you didn't ask me. So, I mean, let's move and try to get them for me. That's one thing. So then the other comment I have, I may have misunderstood, but you said something about the period 1940-1945. Can you repeat what you said? Because I probably misunderstood. There was nothing done, nothing happened in those years. What you should have added is the documents of the son of our famous Dr. Oud, who continued his studies during the the German occupation. I think that is a very important thing to include. More of this, the politics. I don't know, is there anything about 1968? Silence? Okay.
There is.
You understand a bit of my...
I understand what you're saying.
I get a bit nervous, actually.
Okay. Well, if you look in particular at the Second World War, there is some student work that was done actually in one of the work camps in Germany. So students did continue work. My introduction wasn't a complete introduction on the entire history. I just gave the timing and the different periods. I did not try to typify the periods, but indeed a lot was going on, of course, in the Second World War, and partly quite shocking. The students starting together with Schoenmaker, a resistance group, but also the simple fact that in Delft, the students immediately stood up against the loyaliteitsverklaring. Many of them.
Not the group of Grand Premier, which makes it so interesting. So I think that I just want to repeat, you must do more about the specifically this period, because it's one of the most important, maybe more important than 1968, if anyone knows what 1968 is.
I can only add, repeat again, and I hope the QR codes are not going to be the scapegoat, but are going to be an opening towards, there is so much knowledge and we had limited time to work on it. So yes, we need to bring out all this knowledge and find ways to add it. I keep repeating, this is a beginning. And in a sense, I'm happy with your comments, but it does, because it does indicate that we touched upon enough to be able to bring out these themes and start discussing them more openly.
Max, you can you keep it short?
I only want to say a very short thing. That is what it is, a very inward-looking chronology. This was perhaps also the idea. So it means that there is no good, let's say, this all happens in a society which is developing in all sorts of ways. So what I'm missing is the big historical moments, the oil crisis. Let's say the war was there, of course, but also that the Dutch didn't have the First World War, so they were very rich and they could build, you know, the contractors were blooming, things like that. So that sort of, let's say, the historical development of things happening mostly also relate to the built world. I think that could be as a sort of, how can you, at the top, you know, there are certain moments that you think, oh, this was the oil crisis. Can you imagine? 68, Vietnam, oil crisis, all happened. This happened. This was an amazing moment happening in the world, in Dutch, and at the school. What then happened, and so from that moment you get this immense development that the faculty suddenly was bursting, not with students, but with all sorts of disciplines coming in. Social volkshuisvesting, we had building economy, we had all these things we now have all around us. So we don't even know what they do around us. So this diversification was, I think, is a sort of very important thing to, and you don't see that in the chronology. Some of these fragments which you see. So I must say.
Yeah, it's more documenting than that it's analyzing or understanding things, huh?
Just by mentioning it,
yeah.
You know, the point is that you can, you know, I make chronologies. So the point is that you should put things from very different orders together, which make a question. Instead of that they affirm each other. So.
Henk Engel.
Now, adding to that, I want to point to the way the chronology is made. You said very clearly you want to show things by objects, by photographs, by images. And what I think, when you go to the end of the chronology, you come in a period, as Max describes, where it becomes very difficult to represent that in the same way. Because, in the earlier periods, people also thought, they read, etc. But in a way, you can show it by how they made the drawing of a house. I think we are now in an education period where it is very difficult to show on a wall what is happening by objects. So You can say you must contextualize, etc., etc. But it becomes very difficult to do it in this way of representation. I don't know that by putting these digital, how do you say that? Okay. I don't know if it becomes better then, but what's clear for me that what happened after 69 is very difficult to represent in this way of making an exhibition.
In a way, these opinions and testimonies, I think, are very important to reflect on. That as much as you like to add to something, as many of you will know in your experiences here as a student, and this also goes for, you know, the older members of the audience tonight, as much as you add to something, a lot of people will only notice what is not there, right? So you spend hours and hours on your student work, and the professor says, well, you didn't consider this, eh? And you're like, oh my God. But I'd also like to say that that, to me, is a sign of a very beautiful phenomenon which can arise from something like this, which is that if, yes, something like the Suez Canal crisis and its impact on architecture is not included on this chronology, for that individual, there are going to be seminal moments for them, for that individual. And that, it means that they took ownership of their life and their memories and their own history, right? No one's history and the way they look at it is going to be the same way. So, in that sense, it's not to say that whatever is important to every single generation and every time should be included on every timeline because it's just a mathematical impossibility, so to speak. However, I would hope that if people were to look at this thing, yes, 99 people will look at it and say, everything's missing, but I would hope that one person would look at it and say that, these things are missing, to me they're missing, and if, yes, you're somebody younger, you say it's missing, I'm going to take ownership of this absence and say I should also want to write history in a certain way. Because I think right now, in a purely subjective way today in society, a lot of people just say, oh, history is history, I'll let go of it. History is solved, so to speak, as one man once wrote. But, you know, meanwhile, somebody who's a bit older looks at the timeline and says, this and that is missing from this timeline. I personally feel very important, but they're gone. That too has value. And I would hope that, as we're doing tonight, that it's not that I want to be convinced by somebody that whatever such and such thing should be added to this timeline. I should not also think it's equally important, but I should get some sort of new perspective on my role in history and where my life stands today. And I know it's really cheesy and wishy-washy, but I think that is a very important pedagogical opportunity for people to have. Not just to see the absence of things, but also to instrumentalize the absence and hit the QR code and then learn more, but not in any cynical way, but in a sort of positive way, so to speak. I hope that happens for at least 1 out of 100 people.
Nice. But I think, well, it's really nice how you expressed your, well, what history can be, what it can mean to you personally. But I think what's on the wall, it more or less, it represents a faculty, huh? And it represents our traditions. And I invited Stefan to reflect on, our Delft specialty, well, in the landscape architecture that he is working on. Well, please explain it yourself. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Willemijn, for inviting me. And of course, congratulations with this effort to put the tradition of the Delft School of Thinking on the map. And I've, working as a professor at the Department of Urbanism in the field of landscape architecture, of course, I'm also interested in the origins of urbanism as a way of thinking, as a interdisciplinary collaboration, you can say. And when you look back to the history line, and I think then the work of Grandpré Molière and Van der Steur were groundbreaking, because they drew, let's say, the idea of city and landscape into the field of architecture. And then later in the 1940s, 1947, we got the appointment of three important professors, which are Vroger, Van Lohuizen and Van Eesteren, which were, let's say, representing different disciplines and ways of thinking, ranging from landscape research to urban planning, urban design. Later, Professor Bijhouwer joined the team, which was very important because in a way they expressed that, let's say, the rebuild of the Netherlands, talking about context, it was really important to work in an interdisciplinary way and work throughout the scales. And in a way, they did not put disciplines in silos, but they thought that should be an interdisciplinary collaboration. And nowadays, also as a faculty or as a university, we try to develop new faculties which are about interdisciplinarity. But then I think we should also look into the history and see that at some places of our faculty and university, this already happens. So in that regard, I think we should also cherish this, development of ideas and approaches. Because I think this working throughout the scales, addressing environmental issues and relating it to architectural questions is, I think, very important, especially in the time frame we are working on. And talking about inclusivity, Mien Ruijs was the first female landscape architect in the Netherlands, which was also kind of activist. She was actually not allowed to teach, but she was allowed to also provide a lecture series. So in that regard, there were some really groundbreaking moments which in a way shaped our department, but also had a very big impact on the faculty as a whole. And I think also regarding, we talk about research through design all the time. And I think also the relation between research and design was really much explored by these founding fathers, I would say, because they also started to underpin their designs with field surveys. So I looked also into the archives and saw some very nice work of Van Lohuizen. They developed some very smart ways of gaining knowledge and making it instrumental for design. And nowadays, sometimes we use the buzzword research through design as a kind of label, but these guys really substantiated the idea. And that's also what I think we can learn from them on how to do that. Not only as a buzzword or to build on our traditions, but also we can get inspiration, and especially we as younger generations can learn from that.
And is there anything that needs to be changed then in the timeline?
So yeah, so I see, for instance, Plan Ooievaar, which was of course connected to Dirk Simons as a professor here. But actually, I think his contribution to the faculty here was a little bit different. So I would select some other images which were more about the rebuild of the Netherlands. So I'm very, very pleased that I see the Noordoostpolder, where Bijhouwer and other guys were really much involved. But also, for instance, the extension plan of Amsterdam, where Van Lohuizen and Van Eesteren really, exercised on how you can use a strong knowledge base for future design. And of course, this moments of having Mien Ruijs as a lecturer here, I think that's also, for talking about inclusivity, a very important moment. But maybe then I end with a critical note. It's like also what kind of story has been told. Is it a history of ideas, or is it a history of themes or topics? So I would also be a little bit more focused on one or the other. Yeah.
But you want to say that the whole, let's say, environmental question, I mean, the built environmental question is in a way missing.
No, not
and
missing.
At its ending, in the end, it's completely missing. I mean, the work of Maas.
Yeah, Maas, the urban landscape architecture.
The researcher.
Steenbergen. Yeah.
That amazing work, this immense boulder exhibition they want.
Yeah.
You have to change the mic then.
No, but that's in a way it's not. It's in the end. That's the problem of the end.
But maybe what would be very interesting is also to give an outlook and on what are the challenges we face, and maybe as an open-ended, how to say, ending of this timeline, where are we heading for?
Yeah.
Nice.
Willemijn,
Well, since
Willemijn.
we are... Who?
Jan.
Okay, yeah, mag. Ja, Jan.
Because it's funny for the students here. As I told before, I was not in architecture, and you see, I'm separate. All the architects here are sitting over there, and which is really representative. Oh well, I didn't choose it, by the way. But what I'm telling you this because I haven't heard the name of Watjes. And Watjes has been the most prolific architect and professor of the school. Art, you may know how many books this man has written. It was all connected to education here. The name is not known here. It's not, but I have one covered bookshelf with books just by Watjes. And Watjes will tell you how people were building, how they were thinking about building, about how to build, again the word build, and not thought of, not have theories, but really how, if I have something to build, how should I do it? How can I do it? And I'd like to know how many people know the name of Watjes here.
Yes, of course. And there's
not of course.
There's many books by Watjes in the chronology.
The students, have a look.
Oh.
How many? Silêncio.
Right. Okay, we have 5 more minutes left for the last question. Or someone who wants to raise his voice. Birgitta.
No, it's just on behalf of my students because they're too shy to ask a question, I think. I thought it was really interesting what happened over here and what we were discussing in our group, because we really appreciate this timeline and we learn a lot from it. So thank you very much, both of you and all of you kind of contributing to it. One thing we were struggling with was actually what you, Max, also kind of mentioned, was the historical kind of context and situating the development of the BK in what is happening in society and whether TU Delft is acting or reacting towards societal kind of issues. That's one thing we were kind of missing a little. And another was the history of the discipline itself, which is also what you were addressing in your talk. Because we are educating, this faculty is educating architects for what? And the discipline itself is, of course, also developing historically. So I think it would be extremely valuable for students to also understand a bit more that it is a discipline which has a history in itself. So I think that would be really great if you could add that in a future timeline, a bit more information on that. And also this, you could say, interactive relationship between the training of students to become something, or is it more like an internal world where it's not really practice related? This is a bit uncertain for us in our group. I hope this was a clear comment. Thank you.
Yes, Birgitta is studying the history of architectural education here in Delft, related, the students, but related to practice. That's the topic of their history thesis studio. Yeah. Well, is there someone that wants to ask a last question or raise a topic? Charlotte? Yeah.
Well, kind of tying into the discussions we've had now.
First, I introduce you very briefly because Charlotte, she is head of the collections at the library, the central library, to know you who you are.
Yeah, so I'm not an innocent bystander in this. But also coming from that collections point of view and also just heritage at TU Delft in general, and especially the comments I really like from the students saying like, well, you know, what is the history we're actually telling here? One of the things I really like in the timeline that you can see that there have been pivotal moments that where students really rose up and said from like what we're being taught today is not what we want to be taught. We want to be engaging with different topics. Kind of relating that to the timeline, and of course in a couple of years time, I think about 10 years time is what's being mentioned, we want to add on after 2000. One of the big things we're looking at is contemporary collecting of future heritage. And I'm wondering, with everything that's being said today, maybe Art and Jesse, you can comment first, but how would you like to shape that process? Because in the end, heritage is very much future work. It's saving everything we want to pass on to the people after us. So if we're looking at that debate, you know, what is something of today that we would like to keep? Or how would we like to frame that discussion about it? I'm curious what people think about that.
Well, we will wait some years to answer that question. Well, I don't know. Sophia, would you like to have the last word? Yeah, I think the student should have the last word. Yeah. What's your impression? Give us your impression.
I'm not sure what to answer right now because it's a big question. But I think you're totally right. And the things that I focused on most in this story was about the students and me coming from the study association, looking at where students were actually in charge and finding those things most interesting. So yeah, I think it should be a question that we should raise. But I also think that a lot of students right now are very much following what has been said and what has been thought. So I think it can also be maybe a combination of both students and teachers to open the discussion, to make students a bit more comfortable talking about what they think is important and what they want to be taught. Which I think we could do a bit more in this faculty. And I think with the bachelor renewal, that's gonna happen. So we're gonna do more of positioning instead of just teaching the things that the teachers think is important. So yeah, I'm not sure what to answer, but I think we should open the discussion more and make students feel more comfortable to talk about what they think is important. Something like that.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Well, okay, well, I think this is a nice moment to stop. And I think everybody is fueled to relook at the timeline and to think about ways to move on with it or to make it productive or to reflect on it. So, Javier?
Yes, just to finish, I want to thank again you, Willemijn, and Jesse and Art, especially. I felt that this was one of these BK talks that could go back to the previous format in which we had 2 hours instead 1.5. It was great to have your participation. I also felt very much when I was making books and magazines, I was always criticized, why not that project, why not that project, why not that project? This is missing in the table of contents and this is also missing and you didn't look at this and that and that. But I think what is great about it is that you're raising lots of questions. So for me, that's where I stay. I also think of a sentence by Truman Capote. He wrote something, dogs bark, but the caravan goes on. I'm not calling anybody here a dog, but I really felt like that whenever I have to. What I mean is that in order to move forward, you have to select. That's always what I do when I do any books or other exhibitions. So thank you very much for all the work that you have presented here today, and thank you everyone for your participation. We are going to look at the future in the next BK Talks and exhibition. It's called NL Visions. It's again quite of a I suppose or hope, polemic stains. We are going to celebrate an exhibition with big drawings that are being produced as we speak now by several former students of the faculty. They are looking at what the NL Visions team is doing, is a research on what the Netherlands could look like in the future if their investigations start to be implemented now. So I hope that we have the chance to see those illustrations soon, as well as have a debate on what this country might become in the future. So that is April the 2nd, so please join. Thank you very much. Bye.